Have you ever felt that there is one person in your life who quietly disrupts your peace? One person whose presence changes the atmosphere in a room. You try to ignore it. You try to be patient. You try to convince yourself that you are imagining it. But deep down, something feels off. You sense tension, subtle hostility, or hidden competition. And the question keeps returning, why is this happening to me? Sometimes the people who challenge us the most are not strangers. They may be co-workers, friends, relatives, or even people we once trusted deeply. For the sake of this message, let's call them the J person. Not because of a specific name, but because they represent a pattern. A pattern of jealousy, judgment, or quiet opposition. What if this situation is not random? What if the presence of a J person in your life is revealing something important about you? Think about it. People rarely feel threatened by someone who is stagnant. Jealousy often appears when someone is growing, improving, or stepping into greater confidence. Have you recently changed? Have you started thinking differently, acting more intentionally, or setting stronger boundaries? Growth makes some people uncomfortable. When you evolve, it forces others to confront their own stagnation. And not everyone is ready to do that. But here is the deeper question: how should you respond? Should you confront them aggressively? Should you withdraw completely? Should you try to prove yourself even more? Before reacting, pause, observe. Emotional intelligence begins with awareness. The J person may operate subtly, a backhanded compliment, a dismissive tone, a habit of minimizing your achievements, or constant comparison. If you are not attentive, you may start doubting yourself instead of recognizing the pattern. This is where self-control becomes power, not weakness. Power. You do not need to match negativity with negativity. In fact, doing so often pulls you into the very energy that is trying to destabilize you. Ask yourself what would happen if you refused to engage in silent competition. What if you stayed consistent, calm, and grounded? There is wisdom in restraint. There is strength in refusing to be provoked. At the same time, boundaries are essential. Patience does not mean allowing disrespect. Kindness does not mean tolerating manipulation. Sometimes the way to deal with a J person is not dramatic confrontation, but strategic distance. Limiting what you share, protecting your plans, guarding your peace. Not everyone needs access to your inner world. Another powerful question to reflect on is this: what is this situation teaching me about myself? Are you overly concerned with approval? Are you seeking validation from someone who is incapable of giving it? Or is this an opportunity to develop emotional maturity? Challenges reveal character. Pressure exposes weaknesses, but it also strengthens resilience. The J person may believe they are undermining you, yet their behavior could be sharpening your awareness, refining your discipline, and teaching you discernment. Sometimes the greatest growth does not come from supporters, it comes from opposition. And maybe, just maybe, the real revelation is not about changing them. It is about mastering yourself. The truth is, not every battle in your life is meant to be fought out loud. Some battles are internal, some are strategic, and some are simply tests of your discipline. When you recognize a J person in your life, the first instinct may be to expose them, confront them, or defend yourself publicly. But ask yourself, is that reaction driven by wisdom or by wounded pride? Often, the J person operates through subtle comparison. They may mirror you, imitate you, or quietly compete with you. They might celebrate you publicly while resenting you privately. This duality can be confusing. You may question your perception. You may even feel guilty for sensing negativity. But awareness is not paranoia. Discernment is not judgment. So how do you deal with someone whose insecurity expresses itself through subtle hostility? First, strengthen your internal clarity. The more secure you are in your purpose, the less power their behavior has over you. When your identity is rooted in values, not in applause, criticism loses its sting. You stop reacting emotionally to every sideways comment. You stop needing to correct every misunderstanding. You become selective with your energy. Energy is limited. Where are you investing yours? Second, practice controlled transparency. Not everyone deserves full access to your plans, your dreams, or your vulnerabilities. Oversharing can unintentionally invite unnecessary interference. There is a difference between being open-hearted and being unguarded. Wisdom lies in knowing the boundary. Have you noticed that some people become distant the moment you succeed, or strangely supportive when you struggle? These patterns reveal more about them than about you. Instead of confronting every inconsistency, observe it. Patterns speak louder than explanations. Third, resist the temptation to retaliate indirectly. It can be tempting to compete harder, show off achievements, or subtly prove a point. But silent competition drains your focus. Your progress should be guided by growth, not by rivalry. When you elevate yourself purely to outshine someone else, you unknowingly allow them to control your direction. Ask yourself, if they were not watching, would I still be doing this? True maturity is continuing your path, regardless of who approves or disapproves. It is refusing to shrink yourself to make others comfortable, but also refusing to inflate yourself out of ego. Another important element is emotional neutrality. When dealing with a J person, consistency is powerful. If they attempt to provoke insecurity, remain steady. If they minimize your success, respond with composure. Calmness can be disarming. It denies them the reaction they may subconsciously seek. But let's go deeper. Sometimes the person is not entirely malicious. Sometimes they are simply battling their own fears. Their insecurity may reflect feelings of inadequacy. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it helps you respond without hatred. You can protect yourself without becoming bitter. Protection and compassion can coexist. And here is the key shift. Instead of asking, how do I defeat this person? Ask, how do I outgrow this dynamic? Growth changes environments. As you evolve emotionally and mentally, certain tensions naturally dissolve. Some relationships transform. Others fade. Not every connection is meant to last forever. Some exist to teach you discernment, resilience, and self-trust. When you stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally, you regain control. And control over yourself is far more powerful than control over others. At some point, you must ask yourself a deeper question. Why does this dynamic affect me so strongly? The presence of a J person can stir emotions you did not expect: anger, insecurity, frustration, even self-doubt. But those emotions are signals. They are revealing something within you that still seeks stability. When someone questions your worth, do you feel shaken? When they downplay your progress, do you feel the urge to prove yourself? That urge is important to examine, because the moment you feel compelled to prove your value to someone who secretly resents you, you are handing them influence over your self-perception. Real strength begins when your validation becomes internal rather than external. The J person may attempt to compete in silence, but competition only works if both participants agree to play. What happens when you refuse? What happens when you stop measuring yourself against their reactions? The entire dynamic shifts. Sometimes dealing with this kind of person requires radical emotional discipline. That means choosing silence when you want to argue, choosing dignity when you feel insulted, choosing distance when you feel provoked. These choices are not signs of weakness. They are signs of mastery. Consider this: many conflicts escalate, not because of the initial behavior, but because of the reaction to it. A single comment becomes an argument. A subtle jab becomes an ongoing rivalry. And before you realize it, your focus has shifted from your purpose to defending your image. Is that really where your energy belongs? There is another layer to understand. Not everyone is meant to accompany you into your next level of growth. As you evolve, some relationships become strained simply because the alignment has changed. This does not make you superior. It simply means you are on different trajectories. Clinging to every relationship out of guilt or fear can hold you back. Sometimes the wisest response to tension is gradual detachment. Less explanation, less exposure, more quiet consistency. And here is something powerful. When you stop reacting emotionally, you begin to see clearly. You notice patterns without being consumed by them. You observe behavior without internalizing it. You understand that their actions reflect their inner state, not your worth. Imagine how much peace you would have if you truly believed that. But let's also be honest. There may be moments when direct communication is necessary. If boundaries are repeatedly crossed, calm and clear conversation can be appropriate. Not accusatory, not aggressive, just firm, expressing how you expect to be treated. Sometimes clarity alone reshapes the dynamic. However, if nothing changes, that is information, and information is valuable. It helps you make informed decisions about access, trust, and proximity. Ultimately, the presence of a person can become a mirror, not to show you your flaws, but to test your stability. Are you anchored in your values? Are you secure in your growth? Are you disciplined enough to rise above subtle opposition? When you shift your focus from managing their behavior to mastering your response, everything transforms. Their negativity loses intensity, their competition loses relevance, and your path becomes clearer. Because the real victory is not defeating someone else, it is refusing to let them disturb your inner balance. Now here is the final and most important shift. The person is not the center of your story. You are. It is easy to become consumed by analyzing their behavior. Why do they act this way? What are they planning? What did that comment really mean? But the more mental space you give them, the more they occupy territory that belongs to your growth. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin living in reaction instead of intention. What if this situation is not about them at all? What if it is about refining you? Every challenging personality you encounter forces a choice. You can react emotionally, or you can respond strategically. You can internalize their insecurity, or you can strengthen your self-awareness. You can engage in subtle rivalry, or you can elevate beyond it. Elevation is quiet. When you truly outgrow a dynamic, you do not announce it. You do not dramatize it. You simply move differently. You share less. You observe more. You protect your time. You protect your energy. You become selective with access. Access is a privilege, not a right. And here is something that many people overlook. Sometimes the person is watching you more closely than you realize, not because they hate you, but because they are studying what they feel they lack. Your discipline may highlight their inconsistency. Your confidence may expose their doubt. Your focus may remind them of their distraction. That is not your burden to carry. You are not responsible for shrinking your light to ease someone else's discomfort. At the same time, you are not required to shine in a way that provokes unnecessary conflict. Balance is key. Move with humility, but do not move in fear. There is also a powerful freedom in acceptance. Accept that not everyone will celebrate you. Accept that some people will misunderstand you. Accept that growth sometimes isolates before it attracts alignment. When you accept these truths, you stop chasing universal approval. Ask yourself honestly, do I want peace or do I want to win? Winning an argument may feel satisfying for a moment. Exposing someone's jealousy may feel justified. But peace is long-term. Peace is sustainable. Peace allows you to sleep without replaying conversations in your mind. And peace often comes from detachment. Detachment does not mean bitterness. It means emotional independence. It means understanding that your worth is not negotiated in private conversations or subtle competitions. It means knowing that your path is yours, regardless of who approves or resists it. The J person may continue being who they are, or they may eventually evolve. That is beyond your control. What is within your control is your response, your boundaries, and your focus. When you center yourself in integrity, patience, and discipline, opposition becomes background noise. It may still exist, but it no longer directs your actions. So instead of asking how to deal with the J person, ask something deeper. How do I become so grounded that no one can disturb my clarity? How do I strengthen my character so that jealousy cannot provoke me? How do I move with such consistency that comparison becomes irrelevant? When you answer those questions through action, not words, you rise above the dynamic entirely. And that is where true strength begins. There is one final layer that many people never reach when dealing with a difficult presence in their lives. It is the realization that every external conflict eventually becomes an internal decision. You decide how much access someone has to your emotions. You decide how long a comment lives in your mind. You decide whether a subtle rivalry becomes your distraction or your motivation. And that decision changes everything. Think about how much time is lost replaying conversations, reanalyzing tone, questioning intentions, imagining what you should have said. That mental cycle quietly drains creativity, focus, and peace. The J person may only speak a few words, but if you carry those words for days, you are extending their influence far beyond the original moment. What if you shortened that cycle? Emotional maturity is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to process feeling without becoming controlled by it. When jealousy, tension, or passive hostility appears, acknowledge it. Do not deny your perception, but also do not feed it. You can recognize a pattern without obsessing over it. There is also power in silence that is misunderstood. Silence is not weakness. Silence can be strategy. Not every observation requires commentary. Not every provocation requires correction. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is continued progress. Progress speaks. While someone else is measuring, comparing, or competing, you are building. While someone else is watching, you are working. Over time, the difference becomes undeniable. Not because you argued your case, but because your consistency made the argument irrelevant. However, this requires discipline. It requires resisting the urge to seek fairness in every situation. Life is not always balanced in the moment. Sometimes misunderstandings remain unresolved. Sometimes narratives about you circulate without your control. The question is not whether that happens. The question is whether you allow it to alter your character. Your character is your real protection. When you act with integrity, even under subtle pressure, you create stability within yourself. And stability is intimidating to insecurity. A person who cannot provoke you often loses interest in trying. When there is no reaction to feed on, the dynamic weakens naturally. But beyond strategy, there is self-respect. Protecting your peace is an act of self-respect. Limiting access is self-respect. Refusing to participate in silent competition is self-respect. And self-respect radiates in ways that words cannot explain. Imagine reaching a point where you genuinely wish them well, not out of forced politeness, but because their behavior no longer threatens you. That is freedom. When someone's insecurity no longer disturbs your confidence, you have transcended the dynamic entirely. In the end, the J person becomes a chapter, not the whole story, a lesson, not a limitation, a test, not a defeat. And perhaps the greatest revelation is this: the way you handle opposition defines you more than the opposition itself. When you choose composure over chaos, growth over rivalry, and clarity over conflict, you step into a higher version of yourself. That version is untouchable,